Good afternoon or good morning, everyone, and bienvenue à tous, and welcome to our Canada Employee Town Hall with Ian Edwards and some of Canada's leadership. I hope you've had a chance to grab some lunch or breakfast on if you're on the West Coast, and let's get started. My name is Catherine Ward. I am the Vice President of Communications for the region of Canada, and I'm glad to be your host for today's event. Today's meeting will be related to the evolving coronavirus situation and our Canadian businesses' response to it. Ian Edwards, our President and CEO, will talk to us about COVID-19 and highlights of the last quarter. And then after his remarks, we'll take some questions that you have submitted in advance. You'll notice we've combined some of those questions to allow us to address as many as we can in the time period that we have. As we do for all of our town halls, this meeting is being recorded and will be made available in English and in French on InfoZone as quickly as afterwards as we can. If you have connectivity issues, please try and join us on your cell phone or type your questions into the question box, and our IT team will do their best to ensure that you can get connected. Okay, so now it's time to do a quick introduction of today's participants. With me on the line are Jonathan Wilkinson, President, Infrastructure Projects, Dale Clark, Interim Executive Vice President, Infrastructure Services, Sébastien Mousseau, Vice President, Power, Grid and Industrial Solutions, Bill Fox, Vice President, Nuclear, and finally, our leader, Ian Edwards. But before we get into the meat of today, we need to take a couple of moments to do our safety and our integrity moments. So Jonathan, I'll turn it over to you for our safety moment.
Thank you very much, Catherine, and good morning, good afternoon, everybody. So the safety moment today is really around the theme of what we're currently all living through, and I think it's really about having some positive outlook on what we can do in this unprecedented moment. I think it's fair to say if you watch a lot of the news or TV, there's a lot of doom and gloom out there. And I think it's really important that we have to try and stay optimistic and positive as we continue to go through the COVID-19 scenario. So a few little bits of advice there is, one, limit your intake. I think it's so easy to get sat down in front of the TV and switch the news on and see all of the negativity that's out there. And I'm not saying that it's not important to stay informed, because it absolutely is. But I think too much of it can drive you into a pessimistic mindset. The other point I would make is, look to the past. I'm pretty sure that we've all lived through some, pretty traumatic events in our lives, be that either business or personal. And it's actually good to reflect on, on how we showed resilience through those particular issues. So use the past as an opportunity to really look at how we can stay positive. Laughter makes a big difference. Ian hosts a weekly XCOM cocktail, which is a real great opportunity for us to just get together and not talk about business or COVID. And I do the same with the infrastructure team with Dale. So I really recommend doing that. Share jokes, tell the funny stories. There's plenty of humour going on out there at this moment in time. Don't forget that there are people out in society who may be struggling. I particularly have some elderly neighbours who I knock on the door, obviously staying 6 foot apart, but to make sure is there anything I can help them with shopping or even cutting the grass now, which is one of my favourite pastimes now the weather has started to warm up. And the odd little gift. Send little postcards to each other. I've got family in the UK, my elderly father's there, I send him a regular little card, I speak to him through Skype, so I just make sure that I keep in contact. Those random acts of kindness really go a long way to people who are struggling in this pandemic. And the final thing I would say is take an inventory at the end of the day of what you've achieved. It is difficult when we're all working from home, but make sure you close out the day properly, that you look back at what you've done, what you've achieved, and make sure that you set your plan for the next day. So, one of the things that I think has been really great in this is technology. This is working really, really well. So try and stay as upbeat and positive as you possibly can. Thanks very much, Catherine.
Thanks, Jonathan. That's a really good reminder for all of us. Dale, I think you have an integrity moment, which may be particularly at home for those of us in Ontario.
Yes.
Over to you.
Yes. Thanks, Catherine. So the topic of my integrity moment is, do the right thing, even when our politicians are not. So I think we've seen many examples actually throughout this crisis of our politicians not exactly setting the best examples. You know, they've made big announcements about restrictions, don't go to the cottage, stay at home, all of this, and then some of them do the exact opposite. We had an example in Ontario with our premier sort of going through a similar event over Mother's Day. So I think the message here is you know, do the right things. Listen to the official announcements around social distancing, limitations on gatherings, etc., and follow that advice. You know, set a great example yourself around your family, around your friends. You know, and do what's right. You know, don't necessarily follow the politicians' examples. Thank you.
Thanks, Dale. I'd like now to turn the floor over to Ian Edwards for his opening address before we look at the questions that you submitted to us. So Ian, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Catherine, and thanks for the safety and ethics moment. Very interesting, Dale and John. Very good. So I'm really pleased to be here on the Canadian Town Hall. Thanks for asking me for joining you, and thank you all for joining us this morning and this afternoon. So what I really want to talk about is reflect a little bit on last year and the AGM, talk a little bit about the performance of the company so far this year, and importantly also talk about what about post-COVID, you know, where we're positioning ourselves for the future and what does that look like. Before all of that, clearly we're all living through challenging times. This crisis that came upon us has had an effect on all of us globally, all of us in the company globally, and just about everybody on the planet has been affected by it. And if you think about SNC-Lavalin, and you think about our colleagues within SNC-Lavalin, you know, many of our colleagues are actually working on what are deemed to be essential services, essential projects, and they're physically going to work and maintaining and operating assets or working on projects or physically kind of being at the workplace. And we thank all of those colleagues for continuing to do that through this crisis. And then for the remaining, many of us are now working from home, working virtually, and being very productive in the virtual environment, working remotely. And there's many people to thank for being able, you know, for facilitating and making it possible for us to be productive and for us to continue the business operation. And I for one, you know, I'm really surprised at how effective we've been able to move very quickly into this remote working environment and keeping the business going and keeping the continuity growing. Now, clearly, the impact on the business is not zero, but on the whole, I think we're being very resilient. I think the teams are showing a high degree of resilience, and I'm really pleased with what I see around the company and the behaviors within the company and our ability to continue to collaborate together and work together to produce the service to our customers and continue to win work, which is very important. And what we do day to day is obviously more difficult than it was pre-crisis, but continuing to do what we do every day in the most normal way that we possibly can is really important for all of us. It's a really important contribution that we can all make to the continued success of the business, and hopefully we'll get through this crisis and come back stronger at the end. So with that as a bit of an introduction, we had a busy week last week. We had both the AGM, and we also released our Q1 results. And you know, it was my first AGM. We held a virtual AGM. Anybody that joined that live will have seen we had a few technical issues, but we got through it in the end. And if you haven't seen it, you know, I'd urge you to go online and have a look at that, because we were able in the AGM to reflect on 2019, and more importantly, reflect on some of the successes within 2019. And if we just take a moment just to think about that, we certainly entered the year with challenges. You know, our performance as a business as a whole, as we went into 2019, was challenging, and our performance had been variable, to say the least. We then, at the middle of the year, we undertook a few decisions to put the company into a new strategic direction and set it on a path for success. And fundamental to that new strategic direction is to leverage off the strengths of the company and do more of what we do really well, and stop doing the things that we were doing less well. And in essence, in doing that, we're moving the company from what I would call an engineering and construction company to a professional service and project management company. And if you really think about the core DNA of some of the major components of perhaps legacy Atkins and legacy SNC-Lavalin, at the heart of what we are as a business is engineers. We engineer and innovate solutions for our customers globally, and we are professional engineering solutions provider. And I was talking to somebody only yesterday that has known the company for many years, much longer than I, and his response to my story is that you're actually taking the company back to its roots, actually taking the company back to where it came from, to focus on being a professional services company with engineering at the heart of what we do. So I'm excited about the future, because I think the way that I look at this, there is so much capability embedded in this business and so much opportunity for us going forward that we're just about to release that. Now, clearly, we're going through a transition year, and we're leaving the past behind, and we're moving towards the future and the future shape of SNC-Lavalin. And one other big component last year of moving this company to the future and leaving the past behind was being able to settle the federal charges, say sorry for the past, and actually put that whole episode behind us so we can focus on the growth of the company and focus on the company going forward. And I was really pleased to be able to do that and put it behind us. So if we then move and think about you know, our performance since that introduction of the new strategic direction, we have now begun to produce some more consistent performance in the business. And certainly the second half of 2019 was far improved from the first half of 2019. And that takes me to really the first quarter this year. Now, the first quarter, Q1 this year, which we also announced last week, you know, it wasn't immune from the COVID virus impact. And you will have seen in our results that we had some impact around the Asia Pacific business. But actually the good news there is that part of the world also seems to be coming back quickly. And almost life is getting back to normal in Asia Pacific, and the offices are opening again, and people and business is getting back to normality. We're winning work again there, and we're delivering work in a more normal way. The Middle East has been a challenge, and the Middle East will probably continue to be a challenge in the very near term. And we also saw some of that reflected in our early results in Q1. But one thing I do want to stress is that through the second half of 2019 and through the first quarter this year, we have been producing improved cash flows. Now, this is really important to stabilize the liquidity of the company and strengthen the balance sheet of the company. And going into this crisis, liquidity is everything. And we're at the best position we could be as we enter into this crisis from a liquidity position. So I'm really pleased to see how that's been transpiring and how we're able to improve that. The other point that I would make is that we have a diversified model still of businesses. And if you think about our core businesses going forward in terms of EDPM, in terms of nuclear, in terms of infrastructure services, our capital group and our resources group, if you think about that diversification, it's actually helping us face this crisis, because many components of the business are actually operating almost as well as pre-crisis. So that's giving us, again, the resilience and a robust business to tackle the crisis going forward. So what about beyond the crisis? What does that look like? Well, what I can say is obviously it's been important to brace for the crisis as we've been going in it. It's obviously important that we keep ourselves safe during it. And it's obviously been important that we've kept business continuity. But the most important thing is how we come out of this crisis.